Hi, guys. This is Ken Blumberg, your top rated Zillow listing agent. I'm back to do a market report. I felt it was a necessity to do this because there are so many people that are out there that really are going to be caught off guard. They don't understand that home prices can go down. And I still think, surprisingly, they don't realize how bad inflation is and how that could severely affect them in the future if they don't take action now. So I thought it was my responsibility to do this video, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So hopefully you enjoy the video. So let's jump into it. Again, this is a warning to homeowners. Take action now, because I don't think you really understand what potentially is going to happen and what's coming for you as our US debt explodes and inflation burns like a wildfire. So as you can see here, Redfin is saying that there are 630,000 more sellers nationally than buyers. This is the biggest gap that we've ever had on record. There was an estimated 46% more home sellers than home buyers in the US market in February. We're 629,808 more sellers, to be more precise. That's the largest gap we've seen since 2013. And more dramatically, it's up 29.8% from a year ago, where we only had 450,000 more homes for sale than we had buyers. So in this slide, you can see out of the 300 major metros in the United States, there are still 223 of those metros that are going up in price. This does clearly indicate that right now, home price declines are not a national phenomenon, but it definitely is sending a warning signal to the rest of the country. Now, the reason this is happening is because of the potential reindustrialization, as America supposedly is trying to bring back manufacturing, which I think would be great, but it's also being driven by inflation, right? As people are trying to escape more expensive metros because inflation is running so rampant, because they're struggling to keep up with their payments in their current area, then they are moving to these cheaper metros that were left behind during the pandemic. They were older communities, older deindustrialized areas, and now people are going back to those areas looking to escape inflation and also looking to buy much less expensive homes, because these homes barely went up in value during COVID, why most of the country was seeing 40 to 45% price increases. But as you can see in this chart, out of those same 300 major metros, 77 of them are declining, and Las Vegas happens to be one of them. And we'll talk about the numbers and the rate of decline. But you've got California, many metros in California, Florida, Texas, some of the areas where we saw the biggest run-ups during the pandemic are starting to feel those effects, as I always felt it was not sustainable when you run up prices 40 to 45% in that short of a time. There's going to be a whipsaw effect, and we're seeing that now. So here in Las Vegas last month, the number of closings was 2,066. That was down 2.1% month over month, and it was also down 1% from the year prior, which tells us we are going into our fourth year of depressed sales. Here you can see in this lower chart that this is the same metric, but going back to 2005. So the best sales that we're having right now are peaking out at the lows that we saw basically from 2013, when the flood of foreclosures was hitting the market, but they were being absorbed at an extremely rapid rate. Because intuitively, everyone knew if you were getting a home for 50% off, it was probably a good deal, or at least most people realized that. And now, conversely, that homes have gone up 40 to 45% from COVID, and interest rates have gone up drastically to slow those price increases. People intuitively realize they're not getting a good deal right now and they're pulling back. So it definitely makes sense that the market is slowing drastically right now. And here you see the condo numbers, which are even worse. You only had 509 condos close last month, but more impactful, you have a 4.5 month over month decline, and then you have an 8.9% decline year over year. And that's quite a drastic statistic, which is already a very low volume of sales in the condo market. However, though, you do see the same pattern playing out in 2012 through 14, extraordinary amount of sales. You could buy a condo here in Las Vegas for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 for something very, very nice. Obviously, prices have gone up drastically, but you can see again the fall off here in the later years after COVID. And the interesting thing I see here is right around when they were raising the interest rates sky high and at the fastest rate that they had done in history, condo sales actually really spiked, even more so than single family homes. Because again, I think there was such a stampede and such a panic. So people didn't want to be living in an apartment. So at least the condo is a little less dense than an apartment building. But also when people were seeing massive appreciation, when homes were, when homes were going up an average of 8,000 to 9,000 and condos were going up about 4,000 to 5,000 a month, you had people that were desperate to get into these homes. So the condo market still spiked a little bit harder than the home sales at the end of this tightening cycle. All right. And here we see that the median home price is $490,000, which is up 3.4% month over month. And it's up 2.1% year over year. And there's two reasons for this. One, I believe, is we're still feeling the effect from raising those interest rates so drastically. And the other reason is the median home price is getting skewed because the higher end of the market, the luxury end of the market, is moving. So below we can see a longer chart of the median sales price. So right now we look like a massive, massive increase from 2006, the bubble that we had there, which if you go further back, doesn't even look like a bubble. I mean, look at that little blip. It was a huge run up in prices, and obviously it was a major collapse. But look at the way this line, which looking back over a more historical chart over the median home price, doesn't even look that big. So you had maybe another $50,000 increase in your median home price from 2000 to, as you can see, the prices are going up. The increase is drastic right here from 2010 to 2020, only a 10-year period. You can see the home price went up about 100,000, which was basically double what we saw from 2002. And then if you look again in a 5-year period during COVID, you had another $100,000 or more increase in a 5-year period. So the cycles are increasing the speed. I mean, if you look back at 65 to 80, a 25-year period, we didn't get $100,000 increase in the median home price. And from 80 to 2000, maybe that was a little over $100,000, but then you're getting $100,000 increase in median sales price in less than 5 years. So these bubbles just getting faster and bigger, and unfortunately more than likely catastrophic when they pop. Again, we're going to talk about at the end of this video why you shouldn't be chasing the bubble up, because it can cause some severe consequences if you don't get the timing right. The other thing I want to mention is that the dot-com bubble that happened in 2000 was also part of the reason why we saw the run up and bust of the great financial recession. So right here, if you look at the interest rates in the 2000s, when the bubble popped, which is right there, they had to lower the interest rates to stimulate the economy because it was another crisis time. And they dropped the interest rates down here just above 5%, or just below 6%, I should say more accurately, which caused the bubble that we just looked at. And again, now look at where we were interest rate wise, and look at the speed of the rise in interest rates from 2021 to where we are now. So one of the questions I have, if dropping interest rates from 8.52 to only 5.70 is a 2.8% decrease, and it caused this massive bubble that we saw in 2006, then what is it going to do when you have interest rates ultra low? And we're being generous here, but let's call it 2.79. And then you raise those interest rates all the way to approximately 6.8, which is a 4-point increase. I mean, as jobs slow, as AI takes jobs, as we're struggling economically, as we have all these problems and all these headwinds going on, definitely technology is a huge one. Making that shift into making videos or using ChatGPT or building an app and things like that, most people just don't want to do it, or they don't have the ability. They just haven't been trained. So what that really leads to is what you see here, which is the K-shaped economy. Either you're probably doing okay or you're not okay. And more bluntly, this is the have yachts and have nots economy. Because obviously, if people understand the financial markets, if they know how to play the game, if they know how to rotate money and use AI, and, you know, you're part of that good old boy club, then things are probably looking pretty good for you right now. But for the most of us, we're on the down part of this K-shaped economy, and we're feeling it, right? Most people out there cannot even believe the run-ups in costs, and it's probably going to get worse. So look right here, we're seeing housing affordability since 2022, 2023. Housing affordability has been at a very low level. Homes are historically way overpriced for the income that the average person is making. And when you look at all the metrics here, such as home value to income ratio, which came close to its all-time high, very close to the 2006 levels. Even though it's come down a little bit, it is still historically quite a bit higher than it should be. Where, as you can see here, it still takes over 5 years of income to buy the median home price here in Las Vegas. So it has improved a little bit, but the average is less than 5 years income. And going back to 2011, it was under 3. So all reasons why I think home prices are probably going to come down. And again, you can see right here on this chart, if you're buying a home right now, you have to have a median income of $82,000. If you had a 6.43 interest rate, essentially you're paying over 40% of your income just for your mortgage. Where before the pandemic, you were around 33%. So obviously that's a huge imbalance. And then when you compare it to current Las Vegas rents, where you're only paying 25% of your median salary, it looks a lot more attractive to rent right now than it does to potentially buy, especially when you're not going to have to worry about maintenance and new AC units and changing out toilets and worrying about leaks and things like that, appliances. In many cases, it is looking a lot more affordable to rent than it is to buy. And most of that imbalance started at the beginning of the pandemic. So here we are currently where the differential is 60.7% from just renting a place as opposed to purchasing. Where you can see here, your typical monthly payment on a home you own is going to be $2,793, as opposed to if you're renting, you're going to pay about $1,740, a difference of around $1,050. It's a massive deal. So folks, I know I threw a lot at you, but if I've impressed anything on you. I want to impress on the fact that we really don't know what's going to happen with home prices. Home prices have gone up historically over time, but they have also experienced deep crashes. Obviously, it's not as common as it is in stocks or gold or any other commodity, but it does happen and it can be severe. And there is also a massive amount of manipulation happening in the markets. I think we're at one of the peaks where we're going to see a reset in pricing again. But whatever you think is going to happen right now, I'm not going to argue with you because it is so manipulated that the powers that be, at least in the short term, could force prices up if they deem that's what they want to do and drop interest rates and print a bucket load of money. And we'll get into the money printing in a minute. But the thing that we do know, we know the world is becoming more fragile. The world order that was established after 1942, after World War II ended, with American dominance, with the American dollar being used predominantly throughout the world, first because it was backed by gold. And then once we went off the gold standard, we were able to continue to enforce the dollar hegemony through countries purchasing oil through a deal with Saudi Arabia. But as that's all unwinding again, what we do know is we're going to see inflation. We have the attacks on Iran and they're cutting off the Strait of Hormuz, which is about 25 to 30% of the world's oil supply. And even though supposedly we are producing more oil than we could ever need, we are seeing increases at the pump. And although during COVID, they said inflation was going to be transitory, now they are talking about changing the metrics on inflation. Obviously, inflation was not transitory. So as you can see, we're getting cost increases in just about everything we buy: shelter costs, our food, our gasoline, your insurance, and everything else, including your overall housing costs, with property tax and property insurance seeing some of the most drastic price increases since 2021. So that brings us back to the number of new listings in Las Vegas. As you can see, year over year, we're increasing steadily in the number of listings that we have. And I would say not exactly, because you can see year over year and month over month, we're down a little bit, but you can definitely see the trend here that is going up. And I do suspect in the later months, more and more people are going to list just because they are getting eaten away by inflation, like we talked about earlier in the video. Again, if you look at this more historical chart going back to 2007, this is the only thing that's saving the housing market right now here in Las Vegas. And I believe nationally, we do have the lock-in effect with people that have sub 3% mortgages who have a comparatively very inexpensive payment for the price that they paid for the home. One of the signs that we know there's stress, other than all the other indicators as far as just the buildup of inventory, the longer times on market, is that sellers are delisting their homes and they are relisting them. So they are really showing their motivation. It says some sellers have delisted their homes, are now relisting them. So 2.5% of homes that were on the market in April belong to sellers who had pulled the listings in the previous 12 months, then relisted. That's tied with the prior 2 months for the highest since mid 2020, when many homeowners were putting their homes back on the market after delisting at the start of the pandemic. So that says a lot. People were terrified at the beginning of the pandemic, especially if you were older. So think of the amount of delistings, the fact that we're in that category right now. And now it's not because of the pandemic. It's just because people are in shock what they thought they could get for their home and how long it would take to sell, as opposed to the reality for what they can sell their home for now and how long it will take. So it also says nationally, 5.8% of all U.S. home listings were taken off the market in April. So these are people that have removed their homes and have not yet begun to relist their properties for sale. But believe me, a lot of them are coming and are going to relist because of all the factors that we just talked about, with rising costs coming from every direction. And that 5.8% is near a record, and again, was only matched at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And my assumption is a lot more of those people will come back to market, in addition to many more, as people realize that there's going to be a long lag between prices going up again and all the other prices around them. So if you're feeling stuck right now, I want to say always take personal accountability. But in this situation, it is not necessarily your fault, because we had a bunch of different circumstances that were completely unforeseen. Obviously, they spread panic during COVID, so no one wanted to be in an apartment or a small home. They dropped interest rates to an extremely historic rate. And then home prices were rising at one of the fastest points you've ever seen in history. So obviously, if you could lock yourself into a low rate at the beginning of the pandemic when home prices were going up, and you could escape being in a crowded apartment complex, of course, it only seemed logical to do that at the time. And then you had the other factor where a real estate agent and a lender, unfortunately, are always going to tell you bigger is better. So when you got pre-qualified, they instinctively put you into the most expensive house that you could possibly afford, while the Federal Reserve was telling you inflation was transitory. Because if they told you the true story, that inflation was here to stay and it was going to be at higher rates than we've ever experienced in America, maybe the vast majority of Americans who bought homes during that time would have been a little bit more careful to buy within their means and possibly below. And this is also one of the first times in history where it hasn't made sense to buy the biggest home, because historically home prices have gone up. And again, before the Great Recession and the financial bubble, they went up pretty consistently and steadily. So historically, it made sense to buy the bigger home. So again, hopefully I'm building a case here why you must take action now, because what happens when this guy, Jerome Powell, who said he was independent and actually did this by the way of printing $1.3 trillion during the great financial recession from 2008 to 2009 to bail us out of the housing collapse that they have caused through the liar loans and ninja loans and no buyer qualifications. And then through COVID, they printed $4.6 trillion to save the economy, to buy back the bonds and save the stock market, which you could say was a anomaly, to say the least. But we see a pattern here: when they get in trouble, rather than letting the banks and Wall Street fail, they print money. So the great financial recession, I think it was absolutely unexcusable. If you believe the fundamentals of what you were told in the pandemic, then maybe there's an excuse or a reason for printing all that money to save the economy. Personally, yeah, there's a lot of questions still to be answered there. But regardless, it's a pattern. And that's with a guy like Jerome Powell is supposed to be independent. And then you bring in Kevin Warshire, who was hand selected by Donald Trump's team, Scott Bessent, to help him with the economy. And even though for his first meeting as Federal Reserve Chair, they've elected to leave the interest rates where they were, you can see here that they said, when appropriate, increase the system open market account holdings of securities through the purchases of treasury bills, and if needed, other treasury securities with remaining maturities of 3 years or less, to maintain an ample level of reserves. Of course, that's not easily understood by your layman, But we all know what's going on. And when I ask ChatGPT what that means, it says the Fed is quietly leaving the door open, essentially saying, we're not printing money right now, but we're ready to if the bank reserves start getting too high. It's a signal the Fed is watching liquidity conditions closely and has a contingency plan ready, which is why someone flagged it as noteworthy. So basically, even though there's no pandemic, they're saying that they will print more money if there's a liquidity crisis. So if you've looked at our debt clock, you can see that we have approximately $39 trillion in debt. And unfortunately, we're adding about $1 trillion to that debt every 3 to 4 months with no end in sight. So obviously, you and I, if we were experiencing that, and we kind of are in our own personal ecosystem, because again, prices are shooting up around us. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of money printing. So because the debt is not slowing down in any way, shape, or form, there's no austerity that's going to be implemented. The only solution that they are going to have is money printing. So as we can see here from Adam's data, foreclosure filings are kicking back up. They are getting very close to where we were in 2019 before the last round of massive money printing. So I've given you a lot of bad news up to now, but according to Core-tality, formerly CoreLogic, even though the average US homeowner lost approximately $8,000 in equity during the past year, it still leaves the average borrower with about $295,000 in home equity. It also says that current data shows that about 185,000 properties would regain equity if the home prices rose by 5%. So those are underwater homeowners, but 372,000 would fall into negative equity if home prices fell by 5%. So think about that. That's a massive number of homes that would fall into negative equity, just like many people did in the Great Recession, where we had one of the biggest foreclosure waves in memory. So even though they're also predicting that home prices will increase by 6% by December, you also have to take into very serious consideration what is happening in your local metro, because I said we really have 3 different housing markets. One in the Midwest, where home prices have been very low and they are going up. We have the K-shaped economy, so we have luxury homes going up a lot faster than regular middle class homes and lower middle class. So your metro is extremely important. And here, according to my Reventure app metrics, they're saying Las Vegas is historically 12.5% overvalued when you compare the median income of most Las Vegas residents. So think what that's going to do to home prices when this wave starts hitting. As we start wrapping up the video here, you can see the month of supply is also continued to grow. We are at 3.6 more supply than last month, and we are 3.1% from the year prior. So again, we're going into the 4th year of home supply increases. All right, when you look at this longer term chart, you can see the highs that we've experienced in 2022 and 2020. You can see the highs that we've experienced in 2022 and 2026 are as high as we've seen historically since the Great Recession, when you drove down Las Vegas streets and you could see 5 listings on either side of the street. And a lot of the people I was working with at the time said Las Vegas would be a ghost town. So not a good metric to compare to, but that is where we are right now. And then finally, when we get to effective months of condo inventory, you can see we have a 2 months of supply. Remember, during the pandemic, we were down to about a half a month. So this is heavily into buyer's market territory already. We've got a 7.1% increase from the prior month, and we've got a 15.5% increase from the prior year. So things are looking rocky in the condo market, to say the least. And when you look at the longer term chart, just to put a emphasis on it, you see that we hit the highest level of inventory that we ever hit at the end of 2025, way beyond what we've hit at even the worst points of the market, way higher than at the beginning of COVID when everyone was pulling their homes off the market, way higher than 2014. At the beginning of COVID, when everyone was pulling their homes off the market, even back then, we only reached about 4 months of available supply. So again, at our highest level in recent memory, we hit 7 months of available supply, which is unprecedented for Las Vegas, going all the way back to 2009. So guys, to wrap up this video, I would still suggest, even though the condo market has dropped and there is a lot of inventory available, I would say if you have a single family home, if you're struggling to make your payments, if the bills are getting tight, if you don't have a lot of room to increase your income, if you're not doing the repairs on your home that you should be taking care of, you are essentially headed for disaster. And obviously, just like credit cards, the worst thing you can do is start falling behind on your maintenance and your bills, because at some point you're going to need a new AC, maybe you need a new roof. There's going to be repairs that are going to need to be done in addition to all the rising costs around you, your HOA, your property taxes, your insurance, and all the cost of living increases that we have today. So I would strongly suggest downsizing into a condo or maybe an apartment before more home sellers start running to the exits. Again, if you do not have a way to safeguard yourself against these rising prices, you are going to fall victim to losing your house eventually. And there is a small possibility that the home prices shoot up again miraculously and that the economy gets much better, or they drop the interest rate to zero. But that's a dangerous game, because that's a maybe, but inflation is a definite. So again, if you'd like to discuss anything that I've gone over, if you'd like to discuss a strategy to get out of your home into something more affordable that you can keep long-term, have money and savings, and protect yourself against the rising costs of inflation and home ownership, let me know. I'm Ken Blumberg. I'm a 20-year real estate agent. I'm a top-rated listing agent. If you find me on Zillow.com, you can see my reviews. I have close to 250 5-star reviews and maybe 1 or 2 bad ones as well, but you can't make everybody happy. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to set up an appointment to talk to you, come to your home, and lay out a plan for you to make more educated and more informed decisions moving forward. All right, guys, if you stuck with me to the end, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and give me a call if I can be of service to you. This is Ken Blumberg, and I appreciate you, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you so much.